Tonight, we begin with a story that's a little darker, a little more desperate than our usual tales of ballroom glances and chivalrous knights. We're travelling much further back, to a time of marble gods and mortal hearts, of monumental power and intensely private fears. We are diving into ancient Rome, but forget the grand processions and the Stoic philosophers for a moment. We're exploring the shadows, the back alleys of the heart, where love wasn't just won. Sometimes it was magically, dangerously coerced. So, before you get truly comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. And please, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's always a quiet joy to see how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum that can carry you away. And let's ease into our journey together. The first thing you notice is the light. It's the colour of warm honey spilled over rose gold. A uniquely Roman light that seems to make the very air feel ancient and heavy with history. You stand on one of the 7 hills, looking down as the sun bleeds across the horizon. Below you, the city is a sprawling masterpiece of marble, terracotta, and stone. The great monuments, the Colosseum, the temples of the Forum, are losing their sharp daytime edges, softening into majestic silhouettes against the deepening twilight. The day is ending. The relentless heat that baked the cobblestones and radiated from the stone walls is finally surrendering to a gentle, approaching cool. You begin to walk, your simple leather sandals making a soft, rhythmic slap against the worn stones of a descending path. The noise of the city is changing. The boisterous, chaotic symphony of the Roman day, the shouting merchants, the rumbling of iron-rimmed carts now finally allowed within the city walls after their daytime ban, the endless clamour of a million lives lived in close quarters, is starting to subside. It's being replaced by something more intimate. From the open windows of the tall, crowded apartment blocks, the insulae, you catch the scent of baking bread, of garlic and herbs being roasted for the evening meal. You hear the low murmur of conversations, the laughter of a child, the distant melancholy notes of a flute. This is the hour of transition. The morning's formal duties are long over, that uniquely Roman ritual of the salutatio, where clients flocked to the homes of their wealthy patrons to offer greetings and seek favours, is a distant memory. The Forum, which hours ago was a throbbing heart of law, politics and commerce, is now emptying. Senators and lawyers, their faces masks of public gravitas, are being carried home in litters by sweating slaves, their hushed conversations hidden behind drawn curtains. One can only imagine the difference between the booming speeches given in the Senate House and the weary private worries confessed within the swaying confines of their transport. As you descend further into the city's labyrinthine embrace, the streets grow narrower. Here, the grand marble gives way to brick and plaster, weathered and stained by rain and time. Shadows stretch like long, dark fingers from every doorway and alley. It is in these shadows that you feel it, a different kind of energy, a hum beneath the surface of things. It's a city where every wall seems to have absorbed 1,000 secrets. While the state religion is one of grand public ceremony, of meticulous rituals to Jupiter, Juno and Mars, of the sacred eternal flame tended by the Vestal Virgins, there is another, older faith that breathes in the twilight. It is the faith of whispers, of personal pleas, of magic. You pass a small shrine set into the wall of a modest home, a lararium. Inside the little painted niche, 2 small figurines, the Lares, dance on either side of a central figure representing the family's ancestor. A small, flickering oil lamp has been freshly lit, its tiny flame a beacon of hope against the coming night. This is the official, sanctioned heart of a Roman family's spiritual life, a prayer for protection and prosperity. But you sense that other, less sanctioned prayers are also being whispered into the evening air. Prayers for things the state gods are too busy to handle. Prayers for a certain glance to be returned. For a straying husband to come home. For a heart that is cold and indifferent to suddenly, miraculously, catch fire. You feel a sense of being watched, not by any person, but by the city itself. By the countless little gods of thresholds and doorways, by the spirits believed to linger at crossroads. The air grows cooler, carrying with it the smell of the nearby Tiber River, a damp, earthy scent. A cat, sleek and silent, darts from one pool of darkness to another. It pauses, turns its head, and its eyes gleam like polished gems in the gloom before it vanishes. It feels like an omen, a small sign that you are crossing a threshold into another version of this city. Not the Rome of legions and aqueducts, but the Rome of whispered incantations and desperate measures. It was a city where every shadow seemed to hold a secret, and every whisper could be a prayer or a spell. The line between the two was often perilously thin. A prayer asked, a spell demanded. And in matters of the heart, the Romans, for all their pragmatism and engineering genius, were as prone to demanding as any people in history. You find yourself thinking about the nature of love in this place. Marriages among the elite were often contracts, alliances between powerful families. Love was a luxury, and often a dangerous complication. For the lower classes, life was a struggle, and a good match could mean survival. In such a world, where personal choice was so often constrained, it is perhaps no surprise that people sought to tip the scales, to force fate's hand. You turn a corner, and the sounds change again. Ahead of you is the low, persistent buzz of a nocturnal market, one that comes to life only as the respectable city prepares for sleep. The scent of cooking food is now mingled with something else. The heady aroma of exotic incense, the sharp tang of dried herbs, the mineral scent of strange powders and tinctures. You see lanterns casting a warm, inviting glow, illuminating stalls piled high not just with everyday goods, but with things that promise more. This is where your path is leading you now, away from the monumental truths of Rome and toward its hidden, hopeful, and sometimes terrifying desires. You slow your pace, your heart beating just a little faster, a mix of curiosity and a faint, thrilling trace of fear. You are about to step into the world where love was not just a matter of fate, but a matter of craft. You take a hesitant step forward, crossing an unseen line from the quiet residential street into the living, breathing heart of Rome's nocturnal commerce. The change is immediate. The air becomes thick and close, saturated with 100 competing scents and the collective warmth of the crowd. This is no grand market like Trajan's, with its soaring, ordered halls. This is a place that feels as if it has sprung organically from the city's shadows, a temporary, secret world illuminated by the unsteady, golden light of countless clay oil lamps and beeswax candles. The light flickers and dances, casting strange, elongated shadows that writhe on the walls of the surrounding tenements, making the familiar seem fantastical. You move slowly, letting the current of the crowd guide you. The faces you see are a cross-section of the city's hidden life. A slave, clutching a few precious coins, sent on a desperate errand by his mistress. A young soldier, his uniform cloak pulled high to hide his face, his eyes searching nervously, A woman, her head covered by a dark shawl, her fingers twisting the fabric as she scans the stalls. Here, in the flickering lamplight, every transaction felt like a secret pact being sealed. It's a place of hushed tones and urgent whispers, a world away from the performative loudness of the daytime city. The stalls are packed tightly together, their wares spilling out in chaotic abundance. Some are mundane enough. One vendor turns sizzling sausages over a charcoal brazier, the smell of fennel and roasting pork momentarily overpowering everything else. Another has pyramids of dried figs, dates and nuts imported from the faraway provinces of Syria and Africa. You see a man selling cheap pottery, his lamps and bowls stacked in precarious towers. He is situated right next to a stall draped in dark cloth, upon which are laid out bundles of herbs and discoloured scrolls that promise to reveal the meaning of your dreams. It's a perfect illustration of Roman life, the profoundly practical nestled right beside the deeply superstitious. You drift past a stall selling amphorae of wine and the infamous garum, the fermented fish sauce that is the essential flavour of Roman cooking. The sharp, salty smell stings your nostrils, a reminder of the everyday world. But your senses are being pulled towards something else. You follow a more subtle scent, a complex perfume of dried lavender, earthy moss, sharp metallic minerals, and something else. Something that smells like dust and old secrets. It leads you deeper into the market's core, where the crowds are thinner, and the stall owners seem to watch passers-by with a more discerning gaze. And then you see it. It is not the largest stall, nor the most brightly lit. In fact, it seems to deliberately shrink from attention. A simple wooden counter is set up in the recess of a dark doorway, presided over by a woman whose age is impossible to guess. She could be 50, she could be 70. Her face is a roadmap of wrinkles, but her eyes are sharp and clear, missing nothing. She does not call out to customers. She simply sits on a low stool, her hands busy grinding something in a small stone mortar, waiting for the desperate, the hopeful, or the broken-hearted to find their way to her. On her counter, there are no sizzling sausages or cheap pottery. There are small, neatly tied bundles of dried herbs, rosemary for remembrance, lavender for calm, verbena for luck. There are stoppered clay bottles of all sizes, some unmarked, others bearing a single cryptic symbol. There are bowls filled with coloured powders, ochre, charcoal, and a soft pale dust that looks like ground bone. You also see stranger things. A string of what look like dried bird claws, a gnarled root that bears a disturbing resemblance to a tiny human form, and several thin sheets of lead rolled into tight scrolls. You remember the whispers about the Venephaike, the sorceresses, the women who dealt in poisons and potions. This woman would never use such a dangerous word to describe herself. She is an herbalist, a healer, a purveyor of remedies. But you know, and she knows, that the same herb that can soothe a fever can, in a different dose, induce a sleep from which one never wakes. A young woman, not much more than a girl, approaches the stall. She's clearly terrified, her eyes darting around to see if she's being watched. The old woman does not look up from her grinding. She simply says, in a voice as dry as autumn leaves, "What troubles the heart?" The girl leans in, her whisper so quiet you can barely catch the words. She speaks of a man, a textile merchant's son, who barely knows she exists. She doesn't want to harm him, she insists, her voice trembling. She just wants him to see her, to feel for her what she feels for him. It's the oldest story in the world, a timeless ache given voice in a Roman back alley. The old woman finally stops grinding. She looks at the girl, her gaze both shrewd and surprisingly, a little weary, as if she has heard this same story 1,000 times. Not exactly a text message, but this whispered, desperate plea carried far more weight. The woman reaches under her counter and produces a small, simple clay bottle, no bigger than your thumb, sealed with a plug of wax. She doesn't name its contents. She doesn't call it a love potion. She simply gives instructions in a low murmur. A few drops in his wine. Not too much. Just enough to warm the blood and open the eyes. The girl pays with a handful of coins, her entire savings by the look of it. She clutches the small bottle in her palm as if it is the most precious object in the world, bows her head and scurries away into the darkness, a fleeting ghost of hope and fear. You stand there for a moment, watching the old woman. She has already returned to her mortar and pestle, her expression unreadable. She sells solutions, not guarantees. The power of her wares might lie in their strange ingredients, or it might lie entirely in the belief of the person who buys them. A powdered herb to mend a broken heart, and perhaps a touch of something stronger for a heart you wished would break for you. You realize that this stall, and others like it, form the secret, emotional heart of the city. For every law passed in the Forum, for every edict on public morality, there was a private, magical transaction happening here to subvert it. The grand speeches on duty and honor feel very far away from this small, desperate exchange, and yet you feel this is somehow more honest, more real. You have seen the place where magic is sold, and now you can't help but wonder what exactly is in these little clay bottles. You stand there, lost in thought, as the last customer melts back into the river of shadows. The old woman at the stall continues her work, but you feel as though the secrets of her trade are beginning to unfurl in your mind, like the text of an ancient, unwritten scroll. What is in that little clay bottle, clutched so tightly in a hopeful girl's hand? What is the anatomy of a Roman love potion, the formula for forcing a heart to open? You close your eyes for a moment, and you can almost see the recipes, whispered down through generations of women like the one before you. It always begins with the base, the vehicle for the magic. This is something simple, something to disguise the other, stranger tastes. Most often, it is wine. A dark, sweet wine, the kind that already warms the blood and loosens the tongue. Or perhaps mulsum, a popular drink of wine sweetened with honey. Its cloying sweetness, perfect for masking the bitterness of certain herbs. This is the foundation, the river in which the magic will flow. Into this river are dropped the ingredients, each with its own purpose, its own power. First come the botanicals, the children of the earth. You imagine the herbalist's gnarled fingers sorting through them. There is rosemary, its pine-like scent, sharp and clean, included not just for love, but for fidelity and remembrance, to ensure the new love, once sparked, does not forget itself. There is a pinch of verbena, a sacred herb used to purify temple altars, its presence meant to lend a holy, irresistible power to the concoction. Perhaps there are the heart-shaped leaves of the cyclamen plant, a clear example of what healers call the doctrine of signatures, the belief that a plant's appearance reveals its hidden purpose. What better to mend or capture a heart than a leaf shaped like one? Then, the potion's character deepens. The ingredients become more potent, more dangerous. A sliver of mandrake root, the legendary mandragora. You picture the folklore surrounding it. A plant that was said to grow under gallows, to scream with a human voice when pulled from the earth, driving the harvester mad. Its inclusion is a serious matter. It is a powerful sedative, a hallucinogen, an herb that blurs the line between love and enchanted sleep. To this might be added a few dried, crushed petals of the poppy, promising sweet, obsessive dreams of the one who administered the dose. Or a touch of henbane, a plant known to cause delirium and a loss of will, carefully measured, for too much would lead not to love, but to madness or the grave. The herbalist would know the exact amount, the result of knowledge passed down in whispers, a dangerous and precise magical arithmetic. Now, the recipe takes an even stranger turn, moving from the kingdom of plants to the kingdom of animals. It seems that for love to blossom, it sometimes needed a little help from a creature more accustomed to mud than moonlight. You might find a powder made from the dried bones of a small green frog, an animal sacred to Venus, the goddess of love, or perhaps the iridescent feather of a kingfisher, a bird believed to bring calm and good fortune. Sometimes, a single drop of a dove's blood was required, the dove being Venus's most beloved companion. These ingredients feel symbolic, poetic even, a way of borrowing the qualities of the natural world. But some ingredients were far more visceral. The most famous, whispered about by poets like Virgil, was the hippomenes. It was said to be a small growth on the forehead of a newborn foal, which the mother mare would immediately bite off. To procure it was to steal a piece of the most primal, fierce, maternal love in nature. It was considered one of the most powerful filter ingredients in existence, a piece of raw, untamed affection, distilled and ready to be repurposed. The thought of it is unsettling, a reminder that this magic is not gentle or romantic. It is elemental, seeking to harness the most basic forces of nature. And finally, the most crucial component is added. This is the ingredient that forges the link, that turns a general love potion into a specific, targeted spell. It is something of the caster and something of the victim. One can only guess how many clandestine meetings were arranged, not for a kiss, but for the chance to snip a single unnoticed thread from a lover's tunic. How many sleepless nights were spent by a hopeful woman trying to retrieve a fallen hair from a pillow, or by a man trying to scrape a bit of dirt from the threshold his beloved had crossed. A fingernail clipping, a drop of blood from a pricked finger, a tear shed in sorrow and collected in a vial. These intensely personal items were the key. They were ground into the mixture, binding the two souls together in a potent, magical sympathy. This was what made the potion more than just a collection of strange ingredients. It turned it into a deeply personal, almost intimate violation. You open your eyes. The old woman is now carefully pouring a fine greyish powder from her mortar into a small linen pouch for another shadowy customer. You realise the potion is not just a substance, but a ritual. It's a tapestry woven from botanical knowledge, animal sympathy, and the most personal of human essences. Perhaps the most potent ingredient of all was the sheer, unwavering hope of the person who administered it, the desperate belief that this strange and unsettling mixture could truly rewrite a human heart. As you watch the customer pay and slip away, clutching their own prescribed remedy, your thoughts turn from the potions meant to entice to the darker magic you saw on the counter, those thin, rolled-up sheets of lead. What of those who did not wish to build love, but to bind it, to control it, or even to destroy it? Your gaze drifts from the small clay bottles of hope to the other items on the herbalist's counter. There, lying on a dark cloth like sleeping reptiles, are the thin, rolled scrolls of lead you noticed earlier. They feel different. A potion is a secret to be shared, a drop to be added to a cup of wine, an act of introduction. These leaden objects feel like an ending, They are heavy, cold, and silent. They are not for enticing. They are for binding. This is the magic you turn to when persuasion has failed, when jealousy has curdled hope into something hard and sharp. This is the world of the defixio, the curse tablet. You imagine another customer approaching the stall, one whose face is not filled with nervous hope, but with a grim, set-jawed determination. This is a person who has been scorned, a lover who has been cast aside for another. They do not ask for a potion to win their lover back. They ask for a tool to ruin their rival's happiness. The old woman's eyes would show no judgment, only understanding of this darker human impulse. For a higher price, she would unroll one of the dull grey sheets. The material itself feels significant. Lead, not gold or silver, the metals of the Olympian gods. Lead is the metal of Saturn, the old deposed father of Jupiter. It is the metal of the underworld, of Pluto's silent kingdom. It is heavy, toxic, and absorbs the light. It is the perfect medium for a message not meant for the heavens, but for the depths below. The herbalist, or perhaps the customer themselves, would take up a sharp bronze stylus. The act of writing is not smooth or elegant. It is a scratching, a gouging of the soft metal, like a wound being carved into skin. The sound alone, a faint, grating screech, is enough to set your teeth on edge. The words are not poetry. They are a legal summons for the gods of darkness. The curse would begin by naming the victim with chilling specificity to ensure the spirits made no mistake. I bind Marcus Licinius, whom Antonia bore, it might say. This inclusion of the mother's name was a common feature, a way of pinpointing a soul in the vast cosmos with unnerving precision. After the name comes the command. The language is possessive, aggressive, and total. It does not ask for affection. It seeks to paralyze the will of the victim. Let him not be able to sleep or eat or drink. You can almost hear the words being scratched into the lead. Let him not speak to another woman, nor look upon her, nor desire her. Let him burn, let him toss, let him waste away with love for me, and me alone, Valeria. Let him know no peace until he comes to my door, and does my will in all things. The curse might extend to the rival, wishing her sleepless nights, twisting her beauty into ugliness, silencing her tongue so she may never speak to Marcus again. Sometimes, strange, nonsensical magic words, voces magicae, were added. Powerful syllables like ablanathanalba, written as a palindrome, believed to hold supernatural power in their very sound and shape. Often, the text itself was written backwards, or in a spiral, or upside down, a deliberate, chaotic scrambling meant to magically confuse and ensnare the victim's mind and spirit. Once the hateful words are inscribed, the tablet is not yet complete. It is a vessel of malice, but it needs to be activated, to be delivered. The flat sheet of lead is rolled or folded up, concealing the curse within. Then comes the final, symbolic act. The herbalist produces a long, iron nail, a coffin nail perhaps, retrieved from a desecrated tomb for this very purpose. The customer would take the nail and with a single, sharp blow of a stone, drive it directly through the center of the leaden scroll. You realize that the nail piercing the soft lead is not just metal, it is the physical manifestation of a private, venomous wish. The curse is now fixed, nailed down, just as the victim is intended to be. But where do you send such a mail? It cannot be dropped in a public letterbox. Its destination is the underworld, and it must be placed where the veil between worlds is thin. The customer, clutching the heavy, pierced scroll, would have to leave the relative safety of the market and venture into the true dark. They might go to a well or a spring, places seen as physical openings into the earth and drop the curse into the cold black water. But the most common and most terrifying destination was a cemetery. To enter a graveyard at night was a profound taboo for a respectable Roman. It was a place of ghosts, of angry and unremembered dead. Yet, for this purpose, it was perfect. The curse layer would find a fresh grave, someone recently dead who could act as a messenger to the underworld, and bury the lead tablet in the disturbed earth, a poison seed planted in the soil of death. Unlike a potion that could wear off, this was an appeal written on metal, intended to be as eternal as the cold earth in which it was buried. As you stand there in the relative light of the market, you picture it, the small, heavy scroll lying in the damp darkness beneath the ground, its hateful message slowly, silently seeping into the world, calling on ancient, sightless things to do its bidding. It is a chilling thought. The love it represents is not love at all, but a ravenous, consuming obsession, an affection so twisted, it prefers to see its object miserable and controlled rather than happy with another. It is the last, most desperate act of a broken heart, and it feels a world away from the sweet, hopeful magic of a simple love potion. The market, with its flickering lights and hushed desperation, begins to feel insufficient. The potions and curses are mere tools. You feel a pull to understand the hand that wields them, the mind that knows their secrets. You turn away from the relative bustle of the stalls and walk, letting your intuition guide you. The streets you enter now are different. They are the veins of the city that the lifeblood of commerce and politics rarely reaches. You find yourself in the Subura, the vast, sprawling, and infamous heart of working-class Rome. Here, the tenement buildings lean against each other for support, their upper floors jutting out over the narrow, winding alleys, almost blocking out the sliver of night sky above. The air is thick with the smells of life lived in close quarters: damp laundry, charcoal smoke, cheap wine, and the ever-present scent of humanity. Sounds echo strangely in these stone canyons. A baby crying from a high window, a heated argument behind a thin wall, a sudden burst of drunken laughter from a hidden tavern. It is a place of survival, of secrets, and of people who live by rules far older than Roman law. It is the perfect place to disappear. You feel you are walking deeper into the city's subconscious, to a place where the old gods, the ones of the earth and the forest, still hold sway. Your path leads you up a steep, crumbling staircase on the outside of one of the tallest insulae. The wooden steps groan under your weight, and you hold your breath, half expecting them to give way. You climb past floors filled with the sounds of sleeping families, rising above the noise of the street, until only the whistle of the wind accompanies you. At the very top, on a small exposed landing, is a single, low door. There is no light from within, no sound. It feels like the end of the world. You hesitate for a moment, then knock softly. The door opens, not with a creak, but with a smooth, silent swing. The woman who stands there is the one you were seeking, though you did not know it. She is not the market herbalist. She is something more. Taller, with a stillness that is almost unnerving. Her hair is streaked with silver, but her face, while lined with age, holds no hint of fragility. Her eyes are dark and seem to absorb the meager light. She looks at you as if she can see not just your face, but the entire chain of events that led you to her door. She is a saga, a wise woman, a sorceress. And you can tell from the faint, almost imperceptible accent in her voice when she speaks, that she is not from here. She is from somewhere east, perhaps Greece or Syria, a foreigner whose otherness is the very source of her authority. She simply steps aside, a silent invitation to enter. Her room is small, sparse, and surprisingly clean. The air smells heavily of dried herbs, wood smoke, and something else, a metallic tang like ozone after a lightning strike. Bunches of herbs and what look like small, dried animal skeletons hang from the rafters. The only furniture is a low stool, a rough wooden table covered in charts of the stars, and a sleeping pallet in the corner. A single oil lamp burns on the table, its flame steady and unwavering, casting a warm but lonely glow. You are here not to buy a potion or a curse, but to understand. She seems to sense this. She doesn't ask what you want. She gestures to the stool, then sits on the edge of her sleeping pallet, her posture straight, her gaze fixed on you. You walk through the city of men, she says, her voice a low, melodic hum. And you see their marble and their laws. You think it is strong, it is brittle, it is a shell. She picks up a small, smooth riverstone from her table, turning it over and over in her palm. The world is not made of stone and laws. It is made of desires. A man's desire for power, a woman's desire for a home, a heart's desire for another heart. That is the river. Everything else is just dust on the bank. She explains that what she does is not an unnatural act. It is merely the art of diverting the river. They come to me, she says, a flicker of something, weariness perhaps, or amusement in her eyes. A senator's wife, her husband is charmed by a dancer young enough to be his granddaughter. She wants him back. A merchant, his rival is stealing his contracts. He wants him ruined. A young man, his heart is broken. He wants the pain to stop, or he wants the one who caused it to feel the same pain. Their stories are always the same. Only the names change. Men build empires of stone, she continues, her voice dropping to a near whisper. But they can be toppled by a single hair in a cup of wine. They never seem to learn. She tells you the magic is not truly in the herbs or the lead tablets. They are just focal points. The true power, she explains, comes from belief. The belief of the person seeking the spell, and the fear of the person who suspects they are cursed. If a man believes he is cursed, she says with a slight grim smile, he is. His food will taste like ash, his sleep will be filled with nightmares, and his business will fail because his own hands tremble. My work is simply to plant the seed of that belief. Her advice, if you can call it that, is as intoxicating and dangerous as any potion. She speaks of fate not as a sealed scroll, but as a tangled thread that a skilled hand can reweave. She speaks of love not as a divine gift, but as a fire that can be kindled, banked, or extinguished for a price. It is a chillingly practical view of the most profound human emotions. You realize that to her, love, hate, ambition, and jealousy are not mysteries. They are simply energies to be manipulated. As a farmer manipulates the water to irrigate his fields, you are no longer in the world of romance, but in the world of raw, untamed power. The visit is a glimpse behind the curtain, a look at the gears of fate, and it leaves you feeling both enlightened and profoundly unsettled. You leave the sorceress's dwelling and descend the precarious steps, back into the labyrinth of the Subura. Her words follow you, echoing in the narrow alleys. The world is not made of stone and laws. It is made of desires. The abstract concept of magic, of curses and potions, now feels intensely personal. It is no longer just a collection of strange ingredients or chilling incantations. It is the final, desperate tool of the human heart. And as you walk, the city seems to offer you a story, a single, focused vision of one such heart, in one such moment of desperation. Your focus shifts as if you are looking through a window into another life. You see a young woman. Her name is Livia. She is not a patrician's daughter, draped in silk, nor is she a slave in rags. She is the daughter of a stonemason, a respectable craftsman. Her world is one of duty, domesticity, and quiet observation. And she is in love. The object of her affection is a young man named Cassius, an apprentice who works for her father. You see him in her mind's eye, his strong hands dusty with marble powder, the way his brow furrows in concentration when he is carving a decorative leaf into a Corinthian capital, the rare, shy smile he gives her when he arrives for work in the morning. He is kind, he is hard-working, and he barely knows she exists. In their world, conversations are not easy. An unmarried girl does not simply strike up a flirtatious chat with her father's apprentice. Their interactions are limited to supervised formal greetings. A polite nod, a murmured, "Good day, Livia," is the most she can hope for. How can a heart declare itself across such a chasm of propriety? She feels invisible, her affection a silent secret thing with no hope of ever being seen or returned. And so, she did what the desperate have always done. She went to the market. Now, you see her in the main room of her family's small apartment. It is late. The rest of the family is asleep in the adjoining rooms, their soft breathing a quiet rhythm in the stillness of the night. The charcoal in the brazier has burned down to a pile of soft, glowing embers, casting a dim, reddish light that makes the shadows dance. The room smells of baked bread and sleeping bodies. Livia is alone, and in her hand she holds it. The small clay bottle, no bigger than her thumb, its top sealed with a plug of dark beeswax. The very same bottle you saw that other girl purchase from the old woman at the stall. She sits at the heavy wooden table, turning the bottle over and over in her fingers. The clay is cool and smooth against her skin. It feels impossibly heavy, weighted with all her hopes and all her fears. This tiny object represents a crossroads in her life. Down one path lies the continued quiet ache of her unrequited love. Down the other, she doesn't truly know. The woman in the market promised it would open his eyes, that it would warm his blood. But Livia is not a fool. She knows that anything powerful enough to work must also be powerful enough to be dangerous. Her heart is a battleground. Hope, a brilliant, shining warrior, tells her of tomorrow. Cassius will arrive. Her father will offer him a cup of wine, as he often does after a long day's work. But this time, the wine will be different. And after he drinks it, he will look at her, really look at her, for the first time. The polite veil will fall from his eyes, and he will see her, Livia. He will see the love she has hidden for so long. He will smile that shy smile, but this time, it will be only for her. Hope paints a beautiful picture, but fear is a shadowy, whispering opponent. It reminds her of the risks. What if someone sees her? What if her mother wakes? What if the potion is too strong? What if it doesn't make him love her, but makes him sick or mad? What if it turns him into some mindless puppet, his affection not a gift, but a symptom of a magical illness? And worst of all, what if it fails completely, and he finds out what she tried to do? The shame, the humiliation, would be unbearable. She would be disgraced. A girl who tried to use cheap, forbidden magic to ensnare a man. Beneath it all is the slow, creeping poison of guilt. She wanted his true love, but she was about to use the most untruthful of means to get it. This is not how the poets said love was meant to be. This is not a meeting of souls. It is a deception. She is planning to violate his mind, to force his will, to cheat fate itself. Her hand trembles, not just from fear, but from the weight of her own transgression. She stands and moves to the small counter where the amphora of wine is kept. Tomorrow she knows her father will ask her to serve the midday meal. Her moment will come. She takes a clay cup and pours in the dark red wine, then dilutes it with water from a jug, the customary way. Her movements are slow, deliberate, a ritual of impending fate. She places the cup on the table. She looks at the bottle in her hand. One final agonizing moment of hesitation. Then, with a deep breath that is half prayer, half sob, she carefully works the wax plug free with her fingernail. Her hand is shaking so much she has to steady it with the other. She tips the bottle over the cup. A single, dark, viscous drop emerges and falls, disappearing into the wine with a tiny, almost imperceptible splash. There is no flash of light, no puff of smoke. The wine looks exactly the same. But Livia and you know that everything has changed. The act is done. The die is cast. In that single dark drop, a whole world of possibilities and consequences now floated. She replaces the wax seal, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, and stares at the cup as if it holds the answer to every question she has ever had. You watch the single drop of potion dissolve into the wine in Livia's cup, a dark swirl that vanishes in an instant. The act is complete, sealed in the quiet of a Roman night. But as the drop disappears, you feel the story ripple outwards, not forward into Livia's uncertain future, but backward, through time and across the sea. That single drop, you realize, is not just a product of a Roman market stall. It is the heir to a magical tradition thousands of years old. Its origins lie in a land of golden sands, a life-giving river, and gods with the heads of animals. The magic flows from Rome, back to its ancient source, the sun-drenched banks of the Nile. The image of Livia's cramped kitchen dissolves, replaced by the vast open expanse of a starlit sky over a desert. The air is different here. It is dry, warm, and scented with lotus blossoms and river silt. You are on a simple wooden boat, drifting slowly down a wide, dark river that reflects the stars like a shattered mirror. This is the Nile, the great mother of Egypt. In the distance, the angular, monumental shapes of pyramids pierce the horizon, their forms ancient even to the Romans who would one day come here as conquerors and admirers. Rome, for all its martial power, was deeply enchanted by the mystery and antiquity of Egypt, eagerly absorbing its gods, its wisdom, and its magic. The desperate hope in Livia's little bottle has its roots right here. You begin to understand that the little bottle in Livia's hand is not just a Roman secret, but the latest chapter in a story thousands of years old. Here, love magic was not a back-alley whisper. It was a sophisticated art form, practiced by priests and commoners alike. The goal was the same. A papyrus scroll from centuries before Livia was born might read, "Oh, may you cause that man, the son of that woman, to follow me, as a cow follows its fodder, as a mother follows her child, as a herdsman follows his herd." The desperation, the longing for control, is timeless. Even in the shadow of the Great Pyramids, it seems a lover's biggest worry was still whether their crush would notice them. The tools were different, shaped by the land itself. Instead of heavy, somber lead, the Egyptians used light, fibrous papyrus. You can almost see a scribe's hand now, his reed pen flying across the sheet, writing not just with words, but with images. A spell might be accompanied by a drawing of two figures locked in an embrace, or a picture of the god being invoked, and the ingredients for their potions were drawn from the Nile's bounty: honey from desert flowers, ground-up date pits, petals of the blue lotus, and always a little water from the sacred river itself, believed to carry the life force of the land. It was here that the goddess of love was not the Roman Venus, but the joyful, radiant Hathor. You picture her, depicted on a temple wall, with the horns of a cow cradling the gleaming disk of the sun. She was the goddess of music, dance, and intoxication, and lovers would leave her offerings of turquoise and perfume, praying for her to bless their union or to make a cold heart turn warm. Her magic was one of attraction, of beauty and irresistible charm. But the most powerful magic, the magic that truly captivated the Roman imagination, belonged to Isis. In Rome, she became a sensation. Great temples, like the Iseum Campens, were built in her honor, her rites celebrated openly in the capital. To the Romans, she was a universal mother, a queen of heaven, but most importantly, she was the mistress of Heka, the Egyptian concept of magic itself. Her own story was the ultimate tale of devotion. When her husband, the god Osiris, was murdered and dismembered, it was Isis who traveled the world, painstakingly gathering the pieces of his body and using her immense magical power to bring him back to life. What goddess could be better to appeal to for a broken heart or a love that needed to be pieced back together? Just like the secret wish Livia made in her kitchen, a similar wish was once made in a temple in Thebes. But here, the magic could be even more direct. You see a woman, her face veiled in linen, shaping a small figure from beeswax or river clay. It is an effigy of the man she desires. With a bronze needle, she carefully scratches his name onto the figure's chest, along with the name of his mother. She whispers to the doll, an incantation calling upon Isis or the jackal-headed Anubis, the guide of souls. As this wax melts in the fire, she might chant, so may his heart melt for me. As this figure cannot resist my hand, so may he be unable to resist my will. She might then place the effigy near her hearth, or bind its hands with a thread from her own clothes, a tangible, frighteningly intimate form of sympathetic magic. You realize the thread of connection is unbreakable. The naming of the target and their mother on a Roman curse tablet is a direct echo of this Egyptian practice. The binding of a lover's will, the desire to make them burn and ache with manufactured desire, it is all here, in the ancient silt of the Nile. The Romans, in their pragmatic way, simply adapted the ancient arts for their own purposes, swapping papyrus for lead and river clay for potions brewed in back-alley stalls. The journey down the river of time has shown you the source of the stream, and as the vision of Egypt begins to fade, replaced once again by the dim, ember-lit room in Rome, you see Livia's cup of wine in a new light. It is not just a cup of wine, it is a vessel holding millennia of human longing. As the last vestiges of your Egyptian dream fade, your thoughts drift from the ancient, sacred magic of the Nile to the stories that gave magic a human and often terrifying face. If Egypt provided the ritual, it was Greece that provided the drama. The Romans, for all their engineering and military might, were cultural heirs to the Greeks. They read Greek poetry, staged Greek plays, and adopted Greek gods. And with those gods came the myths, the grand, tragic, and cautionary tales that shaped the Roman understanding of the world, of heroism, and especially of the fearsome power of a woman wronged. Livia's potion may have been mixed in Rome, but the stories that warned of its potential consequences were born in the wine-dark sea of the Aegean. You recall the tales every Roman schoolboy learned, the stories whispered by lamplight. First, you picture an island, Aiaia, so lush and beautiful it seems like paradise. The air is sweet with the scent of cedar smoke and flowers. A lonely palace stands in a clearing, and all around it, strangely docile wolves and lions lounge in the sun, nuzzling up to visitors like house pets. This is the home of Circe, the daughter of Helios, the sun god. She is an enchantress, beautiful and welcoming. Her voice, a melody that draws you in. You see the crew of the great hero Odysseus, weary from their travels, stumbling upon her hall. She greets them with a smile, seating them on fine chairs and offering them a rich drink called a kykion, a mixture of cheese, barley, honey, and strong wine. But into this welcoming drink, she has stirred her own magical preparations. As the men drink, their bodies begin to change. Their limbs shorten and twist, their skin toughens into hide, and their voices become grunts and squeals. She has turned them into pigs. She herds them into a sty, and though they now have the bodies of swine, they retain their human minds, weeping with the full, horrifying knowledge of what they have become. This is Circe's magic. Not to kill, but to humiliate, to strip away a man's identity and leave him trapped in a grotesque prison of flesh. Odysseus, the cleverest of all Greeks, only survived his encounter with Circe thanks to a magical cheat sheet from the gods. Armed with a special herb, he was able to resist her potion and subdue her. And Circe, in turn, transformed from a terrifying predator into a gracious hostess and a powerful ally. But the lesson of her story echoed through the ages. It was a warning that beauty could be a trap, hospitality could be a weapon, and a woman's power could unmake a man completely. These were the stories that taught a man to think twice before accepting a drink from a woman whose eyes held too much knowledge. Then your thoughts turn to a darker, more tragic figure. Medea, a princess from the far-off barbarian land of Colchis, and a priestess of Hecate, the grim goddess of witchcraft. When the handsome Greek hero Jason arrives to steal the golden fleece, Medea falls violently, obsessively in love. For him, she betrays everything. Her father, her country, her own brother. It is her magic that allows Jason to succeed. She gives him an ointment that makes him immune to the breath of fire-breathing bulls. She uses her potions to lull the dragon that guards the fleece to sleep. Her love is a gale force wind at Jason's back, propelling him to glory. She sacrifices her entire world for him, and he, in the end, betrays her. Back in Greece, he casts her aside to marry a Greek princess, seeking a more politically advantageous match. He dismisses the fierce foreign sorceress who won him his prize. And in that moment, Medea's powerful love does not simply die, it curdles into a legendary hatred. Her story becomes the ultimate cautionary tale about scorning a woman who commands the dark arts. She does not stoop to a simple curse tablet buried in the dirt. Her revenge is royal, theatrical, and absolute. You can almost see the scene from the famous play by Euripides, a staple of the Roman stage. Medea, feigning reconciliation, sends a wedding gift to her rival, a beautiful golden coronet and a delicate, gossamer-thin robe. The young princess, delighted, puts them on, but the gifts are anointed with a terrible poison, a magical fire that cannot be quenched. The moment the fabric touches her skin, it bursts into flame, consuming her. Her father, the king, rushes to embrace her and is caught in the same magical fire, the two of them dying together in an agonizing, enchanted inferno. This was the power of Medea. Her magic was not just a tool to win love, but a weapon of devastating, world-ending vengeance. These figures, Circe and Medea, were the archetypes of the enchantress, the pharmacist, the woman of spells. They haunted the Roman imagination. They were the reason that women from foreign lands, especially from the East, were viewed with such suspicion and awe. They were the larger-than-life ghosts standing behind every real-life saga. Livia, with her trembling hand and her single drop of potion, is a distant, timid echo of Circe. The person nailing a curse to a leaden scroll is enacting a pale, common version of Medea's magnificent revenge. These myths created a deep cultural fear of female power, especially when it operated outside the bounds of male control. And they served as a constant, chilling reminder that a potion offered for love could so easily become a poison offered for revenge. The myths of Circe and Medea, with their grand divine punishments, fade from your mind, leaving behind a more immediate and human question. What became of Livia? What happened the morning after that single fateful drop fell into the wine? You leave the world of gods and monsters and return to the quiet, sun-drenched courtyard of a Roman stonemason to witness the unraveling of a simple, desperate spell. The air is filled with the rhythmic chip, chip, chip of hammer on chisel, but for Livia, it is the soundtrack to a silent, agonizing suspense. You watch as the morning unfolds. Cassius arrives, greeting her father with his usual deference, and Livia with that same polite, distant nod. The hours crawl by. At midday, the work stops for a meal. Livia's hands tremble as she brings out the bread, the cheese, and the cups of wine, her heart a frantic bird beating against her ribs. She hands the prepared cup to Cassius, her eyes cast down, unable to watch him drink it. He takes it with a grateful murmur, drains it in a few swallows to quench his thirst from the morning's work, and thanks her. And then, nothing. He returns to his work. His smile is the same. His gaze is the same. He does not look at her with newfound fiery passion. He does not stumble over his words or seek her out. The potion, it seems, was a fraud. A bit of coloured water and bitter herbs sold by a clever old woman in the market. Livia is left with a hollowness that is worse than heartbreak. It is the void left by a hope that has been meticulously built up, only to crumble into dust. The magic has failed, but the consequences are real. She is left with the secret of her transgression, a sour knowledge that she was willing to cheat, to deceive, to force a heart. The shame of the act is her only reward, a silent, heavy companion that will now follow her through all her days. Or perhaps the outcome is different, and far worse. You see an alternate path unfold. He drinks the wine, and something changes, but it is not the gentle dawning of love she had imagined. An hour later, a feverish glint appears in his eye. He starts making mistakes in his work, his skilled hands suddenly clumsy. He stares at Livia, not with affection, but with a raw, unsettling intensity. He follows her with his eyes, his expression vacant and needy. The shy young man is gone, replaced by this strange, obsessive shadow. When he speaks to her, his compliments are too effusive, his voice too loud. It is not love. It is a grotesque parody of it, a sickness of the mind. Livia is horrified. This is not what she wanted. She wanted the real Cassius to love her, not this hollowed-out puppet who neglects his duties and unnerves her with his unnatural devotion. Her father grows angry at his apprentice's sudden incompetence. Her mother watches with narrowed, suspicious eyes. Livia finds herself shrinking from his presence, avoiding the very person she once longed to be near. She is trapped, the unwilling goddess of a cult of one, tormented by a success that is the most bitter failure of all. She has learned the hardest lesson of all. that it is far easier to uncork a bottle of magic than to put its contents back inside. And then there is the most dangerous path of all, the path of discovery. Imagine that Cassius, after drinking the wine, falls ill. Not with love, but with a terrible sickness in his stomach. He grows pale and doubles over in pain. A doctor is called, an old Greek man with weary eyes who has seen much. He examines the boy, asks what he has eaten and drunk, and his gaze eventually falls upon Livia, who stands frozen in terror. Or perhaps it is simpler than that. Her mother, tidying the room, finds the small, strange clay bottle hidden beneath a loose floorboard. She recognizes the symbol of the market herbalist. The secret is out. The fallout is immediate and catastrophic. The word for it is infamia, a stain upon the family's honor that can never be truly washed away. Her father's workshop, once respected, becomes a place of whispers and suspicion. Who would hire a stonemason whose own household dabbles in beneficium, in poisons and dark magic? Livia's name becomes a cautionary tale murmured by mothers to their own daughters. She had dreamed of him speaking her name with love. Now she hears it spoken in whispers, tied to words like potion and shame. Her own prospects are ruined. No respectable family will want a girl who has proven herself willing to use such means. She is no longer just Livia, daughter of a craftsman. She is the girl who tried to bewitch a man, a reputation that will cling to her like a shroud. Whichever path unfolds, the result is the same: heartbreak and ruin. The magic, whether it succeeds or fails, has destroyed her. The delicate web of family, reputation, and honor has been torn apart by a single, hopeful, foolish act. The silence of failure, the horror of unnatural success, or the public disgrace of discovery all lead to a private kind of prison. Livia is left alone with the wreckage, a stark and lonely reminder that the pursuit of love through magic is a path that often leads not to a lover's embrace, but to a desolate wasteland of regret. The wreckage of Livia's life, whether it ends in quiet shame or public scandal, illustrates a chilling truth of the Roman world. The consequences of failed magic were not only social. The Roman state, a behemoth built on order, law, and a carefully controlled state religion, did not tolerate magical freelancers. The air in your narrative journey grows colder, heavier, as you turn your attention from the court of public opinion to the unyielding stone courthouses of the forum. You begin to learn of the law against the forbidden arts. While superstition was woven into the very fabric of daily life, there was a sharp, brutal line between private belief and what the state considered a public threat. The same state that meticulously consulted the entrails of sacrificed animals to predict the fate of an empire would show no mercy to a common woman for stirring the wrong leaves into a cup of wine. State-sanctioned magic was piety. Private, unauthorized magic was a crime. It was seen as a challenge to the gods of the state, and worse, a threat to the stability of society. A love potion that merely made someone feel affection might be ignored, but one that caused sickness, madness, or death, that was beneficium, poisoning, and the law was clear. You can almost feel the weight of the Lex Cornelia de Sicaris et Beneficis, the Cornelian law on assassins and poisoners. Past generations before Livia was born, it was the state's primary weapon against such threats. And its definition of poison was terrifyingly broad. It wasn't just about arsenic or nightshade. Any substance, any filter that harmed the mind or body could be considered a venom. In the eyes of the law, there was no difference between a potion meant to kill the body and one meant to kill the will. If Livia's potion had made Cassius sick, or caused him to become so obsessed that he was ruined, she would not be seen as a foolish girl in love. she would be seen as a poisoner, a public enemy. The process would begin with an accusation. In Rome, there was no public prosecutor's office, as we would know it. Any citizen could bring a charge, and in a city rife with petty jealousies and rivalries, accusations of witchcraft were a potent weapon. You can imagine a neighbour holding a grudge against Livia's family, seeing an opportunity. Or worse, a professional accuser, a delator, a man who made his living by bringing charges against others in the hope of receiving a portion of their confiscated property upon conviction. These men were the sharks of the Roman legal system, constantly circling, sniffing for the blood of weakness or scandal in the water. Once accused, Livia would be dragged into the maelstrom of a public trial. Picture the scene. A basilica in the forum, crowded and noisy. The jury is not a panel of 12 impartial strangers, but dozens of men from the upper classes, senators and knights, who may already be swayed by rumour and prejudice. Orators, masters of rhetoric, would argue the case. The prosecutor would paint Livia as a monster, a secret follower of dark arts, a danger to every honest family in the city. He would hold up the little clay bottle as proof, describing its contents in the most lurid terms, linking her to the dreaded sorceresses of myth, to Medea and Circe. Livia, a terrified girl who only wanted a boy to notice her, would stand alone, her small personal tragedy transformed into a public spectacle of fear and condemnation. Her defense would be nearly impossible. Her intent, that she only wanted love, would be dismissed as irrelevant. The result of her actions, the sickness or madness of her victim, would be all that mattered. The jury, feeling the pressure of the agitated crowd, fearing the taint of dark magic themselves, would likely deliver the only verdict that felt safe: guilty. And the punishment? Here, the cold, stratified cruelty of Roman society is laid bare. The penalty depended entirely on your social status. If Livia had been a noblewoman, an honestior, she might have faced exile, being sent to a remote island, stripped of her property, but allowed to keep her life. But Livia is a craftsman's daughter, a humilia, one of the humble ones. For her, the law had no such mercy. The sentence would be death, and a death designed to be a gruesome public warning. She could be sentenced to damnatio ad bestias, to be thrown to the wild beasts in the sands of the Colosseum for the entertainment of the crowds. Or she could be sentenced to crematio, to be burned alive, a punishment often reserved for witches, the fire seen as a purifying agent. You see her in your mind's eye, standing before the grim-faced magistrate, the sentence pronounced in the cold, formal language of the law. Her desperate secret hope for love has led her here to this final, public horror. The story of the love potion, which began with a hopeful whisper in a twilight market, ends with the roar of a crowd and the unblinking gaze of Roman justice. It is a terrifying reminder that in this world of grand monuments and powerful legions, the private desires of the heart were always subject to the brutal authority of the state. You pull your thoughts away from the cold, echoing halls of Roman justice, away from the grim finality of a sentence of death. The story of coercive magic, with its desperate potions and venomous curses, is a dark and heavy one. But it is not the only story. For every act of magical aggression, there was a corresponding act of magical defense. You turn from the world of spells meant to bind and break, and you discover the quieter, more hopeful world of charms intended to shield and protect. The air lightens, the shadows recede, and you begin to explore the talismans worn against a roving eye. Not all magic in love was about forcing a new affection. Much of it was about preserving a love that already existed. You picture a soldier packing his gear before heading off to a long campaign in a distant, rain-swept land like Britannia or Germania. His wife, her heart heavy with fear, slips a small knotted cord into his hand. It's not a spell to make him love her. It's a charm to ensure his love for her doesn't waver, to keep his heart tied to hers across the thousands of miles that will separate them. This magic is not a violation, but a prayer made tangible, a fragile thread of connection against the uncertainties of the world. You begin to see the city not just as a place of magical attack, but of constant, silent, magical defense. People moved through their days, wrapped in an invisible armor of superstition and hope. The greatest fear was the fascinum, the evil eye. A glance from a jealous neighbor, an envious rival, or even a stranger whose praise was insincere could bring misfortune, sickness, or impotence. It could curdle milk, ruin a business deal, or, most terrifyingly, wither a budding romance. And so, the Romans armed themselves with amuleta. These amulets took many forms. Some of the most popular, and to our modern eyes, most surprising, were phallic charms. Small pendants of bronze, bone, or gold, carved in an explicitly male form, were worn by everyone from legionaries to babies. It seems the Romans believed the best way to ward off a dark thought was with a surprisingly cheerful and very explicit gesture carved in bronze. The logic was that these symbols of life and generative force were so potent and comically aggressive that they would mock the evil eye into submission, repelling its negative energy with a burst of life-affirming power. You also see more subtle and beautiful forms of protection. An upper-class woman might wear a necklace of intricately carved gemstones, a piece of deep red carnelian engraved with the image of a scorpion to sting any approaching evil, a dark, blood-coloured piece of hematite carved with the figure of a knight on horseback, a powerful symbol of defence. Often, these gems would be inscribed with cryptic Greek or Egyptian words of power, like Ablanathanalba, the same magical palindrome used in curses, but here repurposed for protection. Just as a lead tablet could carry a curse to the underworld, a beautiful gem worn over the heart could carry a prayer for protection to the heavens. And then there were knots. The power of a knot to bind things together was harnessed for protection. The most famous was the knot of Hercules, the nodus Herculaneus. It was a strong, symmetrical knot that was nearly impossible to undo. You see it in your mind's eye on the day of a wedding. The Roman bride wears a simple woolen tunic, and around her waist is tied a girdle, fastened at the front with this very knot. It was a powerful symbol of her purity, a protective seal that only her new husband was permitted to untie on their wedding night. The knot was a physical representation of their binding union, a magical lock meant to ensure their fidelity and protect their marriage from all outside harm. This simple, knotted belt carried more weight and meaning than any legal contract. You see a young man, perhaps a friend of Cassius, who has heard the ugly rumours about Livia's attempted spell. Frightened, he goes not to the herbalist who sells potions, but to another vendor who deals in counterspells. He buys a small square of papyrus, upon which is written a short charm. I adjure you, every harmful potion and every binding curse, by the God of Abraham, by the God of Isaac, and by the power of the great Yao, that you may not have power over the body or soul of Lucius. Flee, flee from this man. He folds the papyrus into a tiny square, places it in a small leather pouch, and wears it around his neck, feeling safer, shielded. He is fighting magic with magic. These small objects, a knotted cord, a carved gem, a folded prayer, a bronze charm, tell a different story. It is a story not of desperation, but of preservation. It is the story of a wife wanting her husband to return safely, of parents wanting to protect their child from sickness, of a lover wanting to guard their happiness from the envy of others. This was the magic of the everyday, the quiet, constant hum of hope that provided the counter-melody to the sharp, discordant notes of curses and coercive spells. It was a world where people did not just fear the darkness. They actively lit their own small, brave candles against it. The night has deepened around you. The last embers in the city's braziers have turned to ash, and a profound quiet has settled over the 7 hills. The small, hopeful light of the protective amulets you just discovered seems to linger in your mind, a gentle warmth against the memory of the darker magics. As the stories of potions and curses, of laws and goddesses begin to fade, you are left in this peaceful stillness to ponder the great, unanswered question at the heart of it all. What of the love born from these enchantments? Was it ever truly love? You think back on your journey. You remember the desperate hope in the twilight market, the feeling that a solution to the deepest ache of the heart could be bought for a few coins. You recall the strange and potent ingredients of the potions, a bizarre cocktail of botany and belief. You feel the cold, heavy malice of the leaden curse tablets, messages of hate sent to the underworld. You hear the weary, wise voice of the sorceress, for whom love and hate were merely currents to be diverted. And you see poor Livia, her story a small perfect tragedy, illustrating the chasm between a magical wish and its real-world consequences. For all their talk of destiny and fate written in the stars, it seems many Romans kept a few earthly tricks up their sleeves, just in case the gods weren't paying attention. They drew a line between the passionate, often chaotic love of Ama, the kind that inspired desperate magic, and the ideal of Concordia, the quiet harmony and partnership they hoped for in a marriage. The potions and curses were frantic grasps for Ama, while the protective charms were gentle efforts to maintain Concordia. But can harmony born of a trick ever be real? Can a passion ignited by a foreign substance in the blood ever be trusted? The philosophers of the age, the Stoics, would have argued that any such passion, born of magic or not, was a kind of madness, a temporary sickness of the soul that pulled one away from reason. In their view, the love Livia tried to create in Cassius was no different from the obsessive state the law condemned, an irrational force that disrupts order. And yet, the human heart rarely listens to philosophers. The desire to be seen, to be chosen, is a force more powerful than any logical argument. You wonder if, just once, it might have worked. Perhaps a potion, administered with a trembling hand, did not create a mindless puppet, but simply broke through a wall of shyness. Perhaps it gave a young man the courage to speak to a girl he had secretly admired, but had been too afraid to approach. Could a love that began with a lie, with a magical nudge, eventually grow into something true and strong on its own? Once the potion wore off, would the memory of the affection it created be enough to sustain a real connection? Or would the relationship forever be haunted by the ghost of its artificial beginning, a beautiful illusion built on a foundation of deceit? The stories of Rome, of Egypt, of Greece, all fade into a single, timeless echo of human longing. The desire to be loved is a constant, and the temptation to find a shortcut, to force fate's hand, is just as enduring. The spells and charms may have changed, but the heart and its desperate wishes have not. And you are left with the final, unanswerable question. If a heart is unlocked with a stolen key, Can it ever truly be considered open? The last images of the ancient city now soften around you, the marble columns blurring into the darkness, the whispers of the past dissolving into the gentle silence of your own room. The journey is over. The heavy, leather-bound book of history is now closed, its stories put to rest for the night. All the passions and fears of that distant world can now fade away, leaving only a deep and profound calm in their place. Let go of the questions, and let the quiet answers of your own dreams begin to surface. There is nothing left to do now but to breathe, slowly and deeply, and to allow the gentle tide of sleep to carry you away from these whispering histories and into a place of perfect, peaceful rest. The night is here to hold you, to keep you safe, and you can simply let go, drifting now into a deep and dreamless sleep.